Nobara has been a distribution that I have been very interested in, and they have made some major changes as we come to the end of 2022. So today I've reinstalled Nobara, and I want to show the new installation process because there is a new installer. And I wanted to also just talk about some of the things they've changed because I think this distro is really becoming something people want to keep an eye on. So here is the changelog from the December 5th release. Notice at the bottom, this should be the final Nobara 36 ISO. So we're not even really running off Fedora 37 yet. So this is still Fedora 36. And some of these changes, I believe, are going to be the same in Fedora 37 as they are in Nobara. But one of the big things down here is Anaconda installer replaced with Calamares. Some people really like to complain about Anaconda. I'm not a big fan of how you have to partition drives in that, but beyond that, I found it very quick to get in and get out once you kind of get used to it. But there is a learning curve, that is to be for sure. And the other big thing is that ButterFS default install options provide an at and an at-home subvolumes for easy use with timeshift. And timeshift is now in by default. So these are some major changes. This is why I needed to go ahead and reinstall, because without that, I would not have these easy subvolumes, well, at least without, maybe I could do it myself, but I figured I would reinstall and just get it exactly like they're saying it should work. They also have some other things that they've done, like they're using AppArmor now. For a long time, they were using SE Linux, and people were not thrilled about that, but now they're using AppArmor. Like I said, timeshift has been added, and then they have also been working on some NVIDIA stuff, which apparently has been rough. I need to do some more research on this and see if I can better understand it. It's interesting that they're doing some stuff for DaVinci Resolve here. I'll be curious to see exactly what their plans are. I need to see if I can ask somebody about that. There were also several tweaks made to KDE Plasma version. If you haven't been using the KDE Plasma version, by default, it was really a just very basic KDE, just no changes at all. So let's take a look at the Calamares installer, because there is a lot to look at there. I'll power through the install, and then we'll come back and we'll look at some of the applications and some of the setup here. So we're going to go with Nobara 36 2022. We're going to boot in normal, and then we're also going to go ahead and start it in basic graphics mode. The graphics are going to kind of suck as we do this, but that's okay. The reason I'm starting this in basic graphics mode is that sometimes the NVIDIA drivers can act a little funky until they're installed. So this is just to help things out and make it a bit easier to set up. But some big changes have come to Nobara, as I alluded to at the beginning of this video. One of those is that we should be seeing a new installer when we do this. It's also going to use ButterFS by default, and it's going to have a subvolume for the root folder and the home folder because it is now shipping with timeshift installed. So we should have some really good backup options right out of the box. As you can see here, this is a Calamares installer, which is very different than the Anaconda installer that has been in Fedora for so long. This is still based off Fedora 36. We're going to go in and use Chicago. English, US default, sure. We're going to erase the disk. And so we're going to get a EFI system at 600 megabytes. We're going to have boot at 1 gigabyte. And then we're going to have 475 gigabytes of ButterFS. I don't see anything about swap, though. I don't see any way to do that here. It may be on the next. Nope. I'll worry about that later. But it looks like partitions. Let's go back one. Yeah, it looks like it doesn't actually default to having a swap. So let's see if I can actually change that. GPT, that's correct. EFI, I could encrypt if I want, but can I? Nope. Interesting. So it looks like I would have to go to manual partitioning and delete everything to actually do that. So for the moment, I'm just going to accept this erase disk and let it automatically partition, just because this is what most people were going to do. We'll click next. I'm going to enter my full name. We'll go with bash. That's an interesting host name. but I'm not sure where. I'm not sure what they've used to determine those. It's some kind of random thing, and we've done that. Log in automatically. We're not doing that. We use the same password as for admin. Yep. Summary. Okay, that's all fine. Let's see if it likes this. One thing that I will say here, I had gotten pretty comfortable with the Anaconda installer because I've been trying Fedora and Nobara and things like that recently. And so, between a VM and installing it, bare metal like I am right now, I had gotten really used to the Anaconda installer, and, I had gotten to the point where if I was just doing the default setup, I could just simply go to like very few clicks and I would be done with it. One thing that I will say that I feel like Calamares is probably better at would be that I felt like at times Anaconda was a bit more difficult to deal with when it comes to doing the custom partitions. So that's something that I feel like Calamares is probably going to be a bit easier to work with. But for now, I'm just going to let this run, and then I will be back and we can look at the next part of this. Because after this setup, we're going to have to set up NVIDIA drivers. We're going to have to let the system update. All right, there we go. So we're going to go ahead and let this restart. Okay, so you'll notice we have a pop-up here about video playback and encoding. And so this is due to that whole rigmarole about the video codecs being removed from Fedora. So this is just asking you if you essentially want to enable this and install these from a third-party repo. I'm going to go ahead and yes, because that's the first thing we need to do. We're going to have to reboot this machine several times to do all of this, but I think this ends up adding some really nice things to the process. So ultimately, we need to install these. We need to install NVIDIA drivers. We need to run a system update. And then we want to go through some of these options here on the left and include these. Okay, now that those have finished up, I believe, it's going to ask us about the NVIDIA drivers because we do have an NVIDIA card. Let me just make sure. Yep. So we're going ahead, yes, because this is what we need to do. It's going to pop up and, of course, ask for our password. But then it's also going to come up and tell us that there has been a kernel update likely. And so we'll probably need to reboot for that and then need to reboot again for the NVIDIA drivers to actually take effect after that. So we're looking at least 3 or 4 more reboots altogether. On a side note, I think this particular background is from either Fedora or it's from the new KDE backgrounds. I think it's a really good choice, though. I really like it as the default one. I don't even see it listed here. That's weird. I might have to check on that further once everything gets updated. I think this should be wrapping up and telling us that we need to reboot for a kernel update momentarily here. Unless it hasn't been long enough for a kernel update to occur, which is possible. And of course, if you don't have NVIDIA, this pop-up wouldn't have happened, and you wouldn't have to wait for this to install, and you could probably just go about going through and actually installing your updates. All right, and it didn't actually prompt me to restart. In the past, it would prompt you several times to restart, maybe because I'm on such a recent ISO, I didn't have to update the kernel, but I'm surprised it didn't actually prompt me after the driver setup. But let's go ahead and run these updates, and then it probably would be a good idea to go on and restart. So let's launch. It's going to ask for your password, of course. It'll go through and it'll pull everything down that it's going to need. I doubt we'll have very many because this ISO is just a few days old. But yeah, one thing that stood out to me about Nobara is we heard a lot about it when it first came out. People were checking it out. YouTube was kind of talking about it a little bit. And since then, I haven't really heard very many people talk about it. And a lot of the things that I've been seeing come from it have been pretty cool. Like I say, the whole reason I'm actually doing this install is because when I installed in the middle of November, I saw, oh, well, the next release, we're going to be changing how the subvolumes are set up for easier backups. And we're also going to start having a backup utility, out of the box. So that to me was really interesting. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to do anything too permanent to this current system and just kind of have everything set up so that I can just pull the files out and then, you know, reformat once this comes out. Yep, and it looks like it's going to want us to reboot now, which we're about to. Personally, I've really liked a lot of the things that have been done, and I'm really curious to see where this goes next. And while some of this can be done on other distributions, it's going to be difficult to find one that has quite these tweaks for, content creation and gaming. So we've done that. So we've installed the media codecs, we've updated the system, we've done the drivers, we can install stuff from the software center, which I will do later on. It's going to ask for more updates for the NVIDIA drivers, so let's do that. So something that was added a few updates ago is this Nobara welcome screen. So, this is a typical thing, but some of the nice stuff it has here is the first steps, like it encourages you to go update your system. Install web apps is not something I've actually used, but let's click launch on this. And I believe if I go here, I think this is the one from Linux Mint. Let's see. Yep, Linux Mint. So this is the web app manager they have on Linux Mint. But if I wanted to, I could go in and I could tell it, plus I could tell it what kind of browser I wanted to use. If I had other browsers installed, I do not. But I could go and I can create a little web app so that I could put it in my desktop menu or wherever. So that's kind of nice if they include that by default. It also has some installs for Kdenlive, Blender, Discord, and OBS. I've, of course, got OBS installed, and that's what I'm using right now. And then there's some optional installs here. I haven't run the X1 drivers yet. That's something on my list to do. And then you can get they have some information for themes and things like that, and then they have the troubleshooting. So yeah, a very simple welcome app, but, effective nonetheless. And I'm going to be curious to see what other kind of things that they want to add. One thing that I would note that I'm not as big of a fan of is that by default, it's the only Office suite. I will be uninstalling this and installing LibreOffice, but that's just me. It just kind of depends on what you want. But overall, I've been using Nobara for about a month now. I will be using it for another month, and hopefully around that time, we'll be getting Nobara 37 to come out, and I can upgrade to that. And we'll kind of see what happens from there. But to me, the things I really like about Nobara is that it lets you do a lot of things quickly for gaming or content creation that can take a little bit more time to set up in other distributions. Even looking here at OBS, there are some things like automatic scene switcher that is built in by default. The NDL settings, I believe, are built in by default. Those are not normally there. I'm not sure if output timer is, but there are a couple of other things, other plugins that have been added by default that are not in the default setup for OBS. I'm really looking forward to seeing where Nobara goes in 2023, because to me, a lot of things have happened in the past 6 to 7 months, especially to really kind of round things out. Switching to AppArmor, and then now the update to add time shift and the sub volumes by default. To me, there's a lot of good things and a lot of thought being put into how to make this distro the best it can be. So I'm really curious to see where it goes. I'm also going to be curious if more Linux content creators start jumping onto Nobara, because, like I say, there's a lot of things I think that people can like that are kind of done by default, and I expect that will get more and more the case as we go into 2023 and beyond. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and I will see you next time.